to another episode of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we're going to be continuing the Naruto Yokai series, What If Sasuke Uchiha Was a Girl, Part 5. As we get into today's video, we don't have much more to cover before we end Part 1 of the Naruto series, as that will be covered in Parts 6 and in Part 7 respectively. And those parts will be covered next week, so that will wrap up the first half of this series as a whole. Also, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting the Naruto High School DxD series as we wrap up with the finale of the 3-part movie edition that will be taking place tomorrow afternoon. So I want to say thank you to everyone who has supported that series, the reboot of that series, and everything else all together. So as far as the future of Power Core Productions and Podcastings going into next week after we wrap up the Naruto High School DxD saga and we get through the last 2 portions of Naruto Yokai Part 1, from there we're just going to go to doing 1 story per day, but they're going to be mainly in-depth. However, once per week, I do want to do a one-shot video, the what if one-shots, as I think those can be pretty unique in their own way. And I think I'll save what if one-shot for every Tuesday. So that's going to be the main focus of the channel going forward. From my videos Monday through Friday, they will be story videos. However, on Tuesday, I will do a one-shot video. And with the one-shots, I want to try to keep them to series that have a completion. So a lot of the one-shots to start will probably be Naruto based, simply because Naruto has a complete story, outside of Boruto. But with Boruto, I can always make a part 2 of the episodes in due time whenever that series comes to an end as well. So for most of the one-shots, they'll probably be Naruto, maybe Dragon Ball Z based. Although I could get into some other fandoms like, say, Death Note or Full Metal Alchemist or anything along those lines. So that's just something to look forward to in the future and going forward. But anyway, not to make this intro any more longer, we're going to get straight into today's video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Naruto Yokai, What If Sasuke Uchiha Was a Girl, Part 5. Picking up where we last left off, Naruto would meet with Jiraiya, and they would still have their regular training as they did in the original timeline, 1 month before the beginning of the Chunin exams. And this is where we would see a change in Naruto's growth. Naruto having Satomi in his life meant that he had a training partner and someone who could help him develop his skills, especially in the areas that he was lacking, most notably being his chakra control. Now, this wasn't to say that Naruto had necessarily become an expert at chakra control, far from it, but he was a lot more better than his canon self, as having Satomi with him to train with, she would beat chakra control into Naruto, making him get better. This Naruto grew up not skipping days in the academy and being forced to pay attention in class, as Satomi wasn't going to tolerate Naruto being a slacker, and through those methods, Naruto had actually been much better at chakra control by the time he meets Jiraiya. So, when their training begins, Naruto wouldn't take nearly as long to learn water walking, and when it came to him drawing on the power of the Nine Tails, he would be somewhat better at it. After having the 5-pronged seal from Orochimaru removed, Naruto would get to work with summoning jutsu, having formed a contract with Gamabunta, as well as learning to draw on more powers of the Nine Tails. Instead of this taking the full month, it would take about 2.5 weeks, as Naruto would be a bit more skilled in this timeline. Ultimately, this gives Naruto a little more time to learn some more techniques before the Chunin exams begins. However, while Jiraiya would toy with the idea of teaching Naruto the Rasengan, he wouldn't think that Naruto could master it in a week and a half, and as such would decide to teach him 2 other jutsu instead, jutsu he felt could be useful in an offensive and defensive capacity. For offense, he would teach Naruto the Shadow Shuriken Clone Jutsu. Since Naruto was already proficient with the Shadow Clone Jutsu, the Shadow Shuriken Clone Jutsu would be another tool in his arsenal. And in defense, he would learn the Needle Jizo, which would prove to be effective in defense, having his hair form an elongated shield around him, acting as his defense. We would then switch over to Satomi and what she would be learning during the 1-month training period. Not only having Kakashi as her teacher, but also Anko, who would take an interest in Satomi, also being a female who was bitten by Orochimaru and given the curse mark. They would have a bit of a relationship in a way, Anko wanting to look out for Satomi and help her avoid being led down the path that Orochimaru was setting for her, as well as bonding over certain other attributes. As Satomi being a female, there are certain things that girls go through during this time in their lives, certain things that Kakashi, no matter how skilled of a shinobi he might be, simply can't teach, so Anko would prove to be helpful in that regard. Ultimately, Kakashi and Anko would bond over their time teaching and helping Satomi in her training, almost in a way acting like two parents raising their young daughter, so to speak. During this time, Satomi would still learn the Chidori, much like Sasuke had, but since she's been through more and has had more training than Sasuke via working with Naruto, she is a bit more stronger and a lot more capable, so her Chidori limit, instead of it being 2 times per day, would actually be 3. The reason for the slight increase in strength is mainly due to the fact of what I call is the trickle-down effect. That being said, the original Sasuke in the Naruto canon was already formidable in his own right, and keep in mind, he got that far by training on his own without having anyone to assist him, as he didn't like to work with others. But here, with his female counterpart in Satomi, who actually has a bond with Naruto and has actually worked with him since they were younger, the two training and working with each other means that both of them can see growth in their training, and thus they are a lot more skilled in the long run. So this is the reason for Satomi's increase in strength. On top of that, she would also copy Rock Lee's primary Lotus speed, as she was present for the preliminary rounds, and got to see what Rock Lee could do in action, Kakashi believing that she could use that speed in conjunction with the Chidori, as well as gaining an overall mastery over her 2 Tomoe Sharingan, as well as an increase in her strength, speed, and stamina. From Anko, as well as learning from her experiences in developing a hatred for Orochimaru, Anko making it very clear that Orochimaru would want nothing more than to use her for his own gain, and that nothing she gained from him could be beneficial in the long run. Anko would have a few things to show Satomi herself. The first being her fire-style Dragon Fire Jutsu, an element that Satomi could add to her arsenal as she did have the fire style herself, as well as the hidden multi-shadow snake technique, which Anko was proficient at, as it was something that Orochimaru had taught her. On top of that, Anko was not a bad marksman, and Satomi, using her Sharingan, was able to see just how good of a marksman that Anko was, and could pick up on some of her tricks and habits, thus increasing her lethality as well as her marksmanship with a kunai. Outside of that, everything else would proceed as in canon. While other combatants such as Kiba, Rock Lee, Neji, and Shikamaru would do their own training respectively, the Saiyan trio would still not train for the 1 month as they awaited, as their plans for the Konoha Crush were still in wait. Soon, the day of the finals would arrive, and as in canon, just as Sasuke was late, Satomi would be late as well. However, this would not be too bad, because there were wildcard rounds that had to be fought first. Before the first round could officially begin, numbers 4 and 5, that being Rock Lee and Kankuro, would face off with the winner facing Neji in the first round, as well as Temari versus Shikamaru, with the winner facing Shino in the first round. That way, they could move from 10 to 8 and have an official tournament bracket. In the wild card, Kankuro would forfeit to Rock Lee, not wanting to reveal the secrets of his puppet before the invasion. While Rock Lee would be disappointed in not getting a chance to face Kankuro, he would look forward to the opportunity of facing Neji at full strength. Next would be Shikamaru versus Temari. This battle would still happen as in canon, although Shikamaru would have to work a little bit harder since he wouldn't have the element of surprise, as in the original timeline, Naruto faced Neji and created that hole that Shikamaru was able to take advantage of in his fight with Temari. Even without the hole, Shikamaru is smart enough that he can come up with many more strategies, even remarking in the original timeline how even if his first strategy hadn't worked, he had the next 200 moves planned in his head, although he would still reach his limit and ultimately forfeit, so Temari would be given the win and would still advance to the first round. With the wildcards out of the way, the first round would officially begin. The first battle being Naruto versus Kiba. This battle would have been built up for a while now, with Kiba always mulling over Naruto as the top dog in their class, as in this timeline Kiba was the Rookie of the Year, with Naruto coming in 7th overall in the class. During this battle, Naruto would be much more stronger and a lot more skilled than Naruto from the original timeline. While Kiba would have his own various strengths and would prove to be a formidable foe, Naruto simply has too many abilities and techniques to counter Kiba, and more or less, Naruto, not being as forgiving as the original Naruto, would not hesitate to go for an instant win. That being said, he would beat down on Kiba and Akamaru respectively, and ultimately, he would pin Kiba in a no-win situation. That being that Naruto would pin a kunai to Akamaru's throat, forcing a beaten down Kiba to accept defeat or suffer the consequences of losing Akamaru. While Naruto doesn't fully like giving in to this sort of thing, he knows very well better than to try to drag out a fight needlessly. And while Kiba would think that it was a bit underhanded, he would have to admit that he was ultimately losing the fight to begin with. So Kiba ultimately gives up and Naruto gets the win. After this match, this is around the same time that Saskue would appear. Satomi would then appear as well and congratulate Naruto on his win. While she would only have to hear from the other spectators what had happened, she would still be proud and impressed with Naruto and how far he's come, and Naruto would be looking forward to see what she could do as well. The second match would be Rock Lee versus Neji. Before the match, Rock Lee would speak to the crowd, telling them of how he could not use ninjutsu or genjutsu, and how Neji, his teammate, was the former Rookie of the Year and someone he had never defeated. But even still, he was going to show that hard work could beat out natural talent. As he would look up into the stands, he would give Hinata the thumbs up, causing her to blush a little, as she had faith that Rock Lee could win this fight. As the battle would begin, Neji would hold the upper hand in terms of his Byakugan and in his gentle fist, Rock Lee getting hit a few times and some of his chakra points being stopped. However, Rock Lee would eventually turn things up a notch, opening the primary lotus, and forcing Neji to go on the defensive with his rotation. Rock Lee would then take off his leg weights before going into the first 2 of the 8 inner gates, forcing the rotation open with his sheer strength before delivering a devastating upper kick to Neji, delivering a series of body blows that Neji simply won't be able to beat. Rock Lee would then finish it off by going into the 3rd gate, delivering a devastating haymaker, knocking Neji out cold in the arena, giving him the win and allowing him to advance. However, despite all of that, and despite Neji beating up on Hinata earlier, Lee would still go to help Neji up and show good sportsmanship, helping his teammate to the infirmary, where he would learn of his backstory and how he lost his father, as well as the fate of the Hyuga clan. However, Lee would tell Neji that even he could become a free bird, and that if the 2 of them work together, they can change their destinies in the way of the Hyuga clan. Heihachi would still come and apologize to Neji for the death of his father, and while it would be slow, the 2 sides would still mend fences as in the original canon. And as such, Rock Lee would get the win and advance to the next round. The next battle would see Satomi versus Gaara. Much like Saskue versus Gaara, this battle is going to be a lot more different than in the original timeline, mainly because Gaara never actually fought anyone that pushed or gave him a challenge, so he still has the mentality that he is unbeatable, which quickly gets changed when Satomi shows off her true strength and her speed. Moving as fast as primary Lotus Lee, who was able to evade many of Gaara's attacks and land a few of his own, Satomi with her Sharingan would easily be able to evade the sand that attacks her, moving at blinding speeds that the sand simply can't keep up with. This would catch Gaara even more off guard, as this will be the first time he actually takes damage, as the young female Uchiha would beat him all around the arena senselessly, forcing Gaara to go on even more of the defensive. However, Satomi would have a counter in every way, shape, and form. Using the shadow snakes that she had learned from Anko, she would be able to move in close enough as a few of them would strike Gaara, piercing him and giving him a paralyzing substance that would cause him to lose some of his motor skills and senses, dulling him a bit and forcing him to move a bit more slowly as he would stagger throughout the arena. With him being stunned from the poison, Satomi would then get to work on breaking down Gaara's defenses even more, beating him down and forcing him to enter into a sand dome. First, Satomi would use the Dragon Fire Jutsu, launching it at full power towards the sand dome, encasing it in fire and making it almost as brittle as glass, before she would charge her next attack, that being the Chidori. Going in at full power and avoiding the sand spikes, she would not only stab her Chidori to the sand dome that would break away much more easier due to the Dragon Fire she had launched at it before, but this would also pierce Gaara deeper in the shoulder, causing him even more pain, not only dealing with the sterilizing poison that had paralyzed him earlier from the striking shadow snakes, but now dealing with a Chidori to the shoulder. Gaara would now be feeling even more pain and would be even more damage than before. During this time, the attack from both the sound and the sand would begin, and the Konoha Crush would get underway, as the third Hokage was still engaged in his fight with Orochimaru, as the village would find itself under attack. As the Konoha Crush would begin, both Kankuro and Temari would now take an even more injured and weakened Gaara away, as Satomi would be sent after them, much like Saskue was. Sakura, who would be in the stands, would wake up Naruto, and Shikamaru, who was fake sleeping, and Rock Lee would join in the fray as well. Kakashi and Guy would take out the Sand and Sound Ninja who were attacking, as Kakashi would summon Paku, and would have the four-man team of Naruto, Sakura, Shikamaru, and Lee go after Satomi. Unknown to them, Shino, who was still in the stands, had already left and was pursuing the Sand Trio as well as Satomi, still winding up in his fight against Kankuro as in the original timeline, while Temari would be carrying an even more injured and weakened Gaara, with Satomi quickly behind them. As Naruto and his team would still chase after them, Shikamaru would still stay behind to throw off the Sand Chunmu who were chasing after them as in the original timeline, and Asuma would still save them ultimately after he had successfully stopped them. By the time Satomi catches up with Gaara, now being even more desperate and unhinged, he would enter into his half-monstrous state, the one that he had fought Naruto in the original canon. However, this Satomi, who is a lot more stronger and skilled, would be able to hold out on her own just enough before the others would arrive. Not that she would be able to beat Gaara on her own, but she would just be a bit more better than the original Sasuke, and as such would not have to rely on the Curse Mark's power, as she still has two more Chidoris up her sleeve. She would use one of them that would do some damage, but ultimately Gaara would still be unhinged. As everyone else would arrive, they would back up Satomi as the 5-on-1 fight would begin, Naruto summoning his multiple shadow clones all around the battlefield, Rock Lee going into his third and even fourth gates to do damage to Gaara, who would be unable to counter the overwhelming force the two could pull off, while Sakura would try to stun him with her Genjutsu, as well as any other long-range attacks, mainly being the Water Dragon Jutsu, which would be able to soak in Gaara's sand, and he would find it even harder to use in the original timeline. Ultimately, Satomi would come from behind with a Chidori, aiming it at the other's shoulder, injuring Gaara even more, and not allowing him to even use his Shukaku. Ultimately, Rock Lee and Naruto would combine for an all-out assault, the two going all out with Naruto using the 2K Uzumaki Barrage, as well as Rock Lee, who would open not only the 5th but even the 6th gate before driving Gaara straight into the ground below. And now much more weakened and beaten up Gaara would not have the ability to try to summon Shukaku, as he wouldn't have the strength to, and he would be surrounded by 5 shinobi who would be more than capable of taking him out, forcing him on to retreat and thus scaring him. However, before anyone else can make a charge, Naruto would be the first to step forward to Gaara, as Gaara would have sensed for a while now that he and Naruto were a lot alike, and Naruto would remark those feelings, as he would explain to Gaara that he too wore a Jinchuriki, and that he understood what it was like to be hated by the village. Gaara would then listen to Naruto's story, along with everyone else who would be present, as Naruto would tell the story of growing up in the village and in the leaves. He would tell Gaara of how he too were hated for the beast inside, and how just like him, he wanted to kill everyone who had brought him harm. Gaara now relating to Naruto, as he could now see a kindred spirit, so to speak. However, Naruto would go on to explain that things weren't all bad, because in the end, he did have people who loved and cared for him. He would also point out to Satomi being one of the first people who accepted him for who he was. While Satomi would not give Naruto a direct look, instead looking away from everyone, she couldn't help but have a faint red expression on her face, knowing that Naruto actually saw her in that way, and that of all the people, she was one of his more precious ones, something that she would cherish, although she wouldn't tell everyone else right away. Although Sakura could pick up on things, and she could tell that even if Satomi wasn't ready to admit it now, she had a thing for Naruto, which would make sense since the two of them seemed to always be close together. Naruto would then tell Gaara that he had his family and his siblings, and that he shouldn't forsake them, but instead he should cherish them above all else. As Temari and Kankuro would come to pick up their brother, worried that he would try to attack them, Gaara would instead say that he were done fighting, and he would apologize to his brother and sister for everything that had happened. With that, Gaara would be defeated, and the rest of the Hidden Leaf beginning would return back to the battles that had now finally been over. However, just like as in canon, the third Hokage would still die in his battle against Orochimaru, which would now not only affect Naruto, but Satomi as well, as the third Hokage had been kind to them, and had been looking out for them ever since the Uchiha massacre. Although Satomi wasn't as close to the third Hokage, she couldn't deny that he had been a help to her, and thus she could understand the pain that Naruto was feeling, as Naruto viewed the third Hokage much like a grandfather in a sense, as even before he had met Satomi, it was the third Hokage who had been looking out for him during all of that time. She would help Naruto try to get through it, assuring him that things wouldn't be too bad, and that the third Hokage died sacrificing himself for the village, and that he truly lived up to his title as Hokage, something that Naruto aspired to be after all. During the rebuilding and construction, Jiraiya would still be offered the title of Hokage, but he would turn it down, as he would still want to continue his spy network, and he had his hands become full with training Naruto. But he would still make the same offer as before, the offer being to retrieve another Sannin who would be just as capable of becoming Hokage. although she would need to be tracked down first. That Sani, being none other than the slug princess herself, Lady Tsunade. The village elders would agree with Jiraiya and would also allow him to take Naruto as well, as this would be a way for him to train Naruto even more, as he felt now would be the time to show the young shinobi the steps to one of his more powerful jutsu and one of the fourth Hokage's legacies, the Rasengan. As Naruto would be preparing for his trip, Satomi would ask Naruto how long he would be gone, and Naruto wouldn't be entirely sure, but he was going to be going with Master Jiraiya for some more training. Satomi would wish Naruto good luck and tell him not to do anything too stupid in the meantime. As Naruto and Jiraiya would begin their quest leaving, that is when two more figures, unknown to the Hidden Leaf, would enter into the village. And of the two, one of them would have a unique history to both Naruto and Satomi. Someone they had not seen since the night of the massacre. He would be none other than Satomi's older brother, Itachi Uchiha. This concludes Naruto Yokai, Part 5, What if Sasuke Uchiha was a girl? For all this and more, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Powerful Productions and Podcasters that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow afternoon when we do the finale for What if Naruto was in High School DxD, the movie Sins of the Past. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcasters, signing off, and I'll see you next time.